Welcome to session 2, boldly titled Solutions for the Brighter Future. The chair for this session is Enno Schmidt, who is a German artist and activist for basic income. He is the co-founder of the Swiss initiative for basic income, which was a large campaign leading up to the referendum. And he's also been a very important voice in the debate internationally. He once said in a TEDx interview, when he was asked about the number of supporters for basic income, that everyone is for it, but they just don't know it yet, which I thought was very well put. So, Enno, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So welcome here, and I hope this will make a start in Norway, that Norway contributes and take part in the global discussion. And as we heard before, it's inevitable that an unconditional basic income will be implemented because that's necessary, and that's the same idea like democracy, human rights, abolishing slavery. It's always the same idea in a different time, different people, different status of development. So, and I guess our thing to do, our target, our commission is that it includes humanity, it includes moral and ethic issues. So that's the basic income for the people. It can be misused as well as every big idea can misuse and will try to be misused. So I think that's what I want to say. We talk about solutions for a brighter future. We talk about an unconditional basic income. We are not those who implement that, finally, but we, I guess, are those who define and determine what it is, how it is implemented, what it is in a moral way, moral sense. So that's my brief statement in before, and now I think we start with a short introduction of the participants at the panel and a short statement of each of them, and a little bit of discussion here on the podium, but then, of course, we want to open up for your statements or questions for the discussion with you. I would like to start with Lena. Lena is just in the run, you are warmed up. So, you are already introduced. You have been core member of the UBI European initiative and movement. And what is not said yet is that you are working with troubled teenagers, in particular women, and also with older addicts, alcoholics. So this is your background of experience also for your going for basic income. It's your time, let's say 5 minutes or something like that, or whatever you want. Maybe 1 hour. Yeah, if you have a statement. Otherwise I give you a question. How you like it?
Yeah, but
You have a statement.
I don't know if it's a statement, but considering the theme, solution for a brighter future, so I mean, I think all of us in here knows what it is, and so we already solved that, so it's the UBI. But the thing is, and it's like with you, how do we get other people to realize that this is the solution? And I think we have to find different ways, and that's the greatness with the UBI. You can come into it from all different angles, so we need to find all these angles and to explain for people that are involved in different areas why it's such a brilliant idea. And I think that is the hardest bit. We have to be plain and simple when we describe why we all gain on a basic income. No phone.
Okay, we come back to that. I introduced Barb Jacobsen. She's coordinator Basic Income UK and advocate for rights for people who need help. And you are working 35 years for rights for women, for shelter, for people who need help. And you are, what is the name? Founding chair of UBI Europe. And you are knowing everything about everything what's going on in the UK and in Europe.
Okay, that's quite an introduction. Thank you, Enno, and thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. I just wasn't quite sure what I was going to say today. Part of me played with a lot of ideas about, you know, how basic income would right the things that are upside down right now, and particularly, you know, how we think about money. And how we think about work and how we think about each other. But I also have to say, I mean, obviously the big thing on everyone in the UK's mind at the moment is Brexit. So I thought, well, that would probably be the thing that I could specifically talk about, both the whys and wherefores, and also what I can see as maybe a way out. And yeah, we'll see about that. I work as a welfare rights advisor. And I also work with pensioners in Central, for a small charity in Central London. And I have to say that the week that I had before I came here was, if nothing else, something that really kind of fired me up again about basic income. I work with a lot of people with long-term health conditions. Most of them are my age or a bit older, and they're being pressured into work because of the way the welfare system has changed in the UK, so that it doesn't really matter you know, how old you are, and because they've also raised the pension age, so for women it's gone from 60 to 67 in a very short time. Men, it's also creeping up from 65 to 67, and there's really no there's really no recognition given about, you know, the effects of different jobs on our bodies and on our health. We work a lot with Bangladeshi people. Most of them, the older ones in particular, have worked in restaurants. And anyone who's worked in a restaurant, whether as a waiter or as a chef, you're basically, you know, as a waiter, your working life is probably 10 years at most. As a chef, you can probably last until maybe 50. But the ones that last beyond 50 usually have hip replacements, all right? If they haven't already picked up a coke habit, all right? Because you're talking about 16-hour days, a lot of pressure, having to get things out, having to manage people, etc., etc. Okay, so there's no recognition in our current system, in our current welfare system, for the different effects of different jobs. I mean, there are some jobs that you can do until you're 90. I mean, if you're sitting at a computer and you don't have to walk around, you know, you can probably do that until whenever, okay, until you can't see. But the people I'm working with, they usually have physical jobs. I'm also, one thing that's also very much at the forefront of my mind right now is migration. I'm working with several people who are homeless or near homeless, who are European migrants, one from Bulgaria, the other one from Poland. And, you know, because of physical disabilities, again, that they picked up on the job, they were working in the building trades. One has epilepsy and started falling off ladders. The other one was, rather than being paid, his last employer cut his thigh up with a knife, all right? So, you know, it's one of the things that really makes me very much interested in ideas like a Eurodividend, because, you know, while we have so-called freedom of movement in Europe, it's actually freedom to work somewhere. All right, it's not freedom of movement. It's, you know, if you don't work somewhere for 2 years, for at least 2 years, if you take a break, if say you've worked for 10 years, like the guy whose leg was cut. If you work for 10 years there, if you have to leave for longer than 2 years, then you lose all your rights as a migrant in a particular country. So I'm really interested in ideas like Eurodividend or like a world basic income that would make it possible, okay, not just to, you know, not just to exist in another country, but also to exist in your own country. The other thing we're looking at in places like Bulgaria is the population has about a third to a half of the population has migrated out of Bulgaria. I know it's a similar problem in Greece, in the other poor countries in Europe, where it's basically, or in Portugal, where the government actually encourages youth to go out of the country and to bring the money back. But actually, you know, while that is very, you know, while, you know, it's, when we're young, we all want to travel and all that sort of thing, you know, losing those skills and losing that energy and losing the ideas that people have, I think, is really devastating for those countries. So I really want to see a Europe where there is real freedom of movement, all right, where we're not just, it's not just about, you know, you can work somewhere, but also that you can stay in a place. I mean, a thing that, you know, that almost never comes into the whole migration debate is, you know, how we're destroying, you know, how Europe and the US in particular are helping to destroy other countries, all right, whether that's through war, or whether that's through land dispossession, or whether that's through environmental degradation, all right? And that has to stop. Now, basic income won't have a direct impact on that, but again, as was said before, it would provide a kind of floor so that people can, you know, can stay and solve the problems in their home countries, and that they actually have a real choice, all right, about whether to stay or to go. That's the kind of world I want to see. And that's really all I have to say right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So I guess now we come to the question of financing a bit. I have to read it to introduce Jaacobi from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and he is Chief Financial Officer and Chief Economist and Economic Consultant in several companies and organizations. Dissertation about tax, in which the progressivity is achieved by a UBI loans. Economics lead in Gold Dollar, a 100% non-profit project, where they examine the implementation of a global UBI over blockchain in an open source cryptocurrency. So that sounds very interesting. I would like to give you the word.
Well, after such an opening, I don't know if I have what to add, but I can thank you for inviting me. I thought I will come to speak, and I will speak about UBI, global UBI, and cryptocurrencies, and the technology of blockchain. But first, as Enno mentioned, my PhD dissertation was about VAT, and I want to correct the impression that was made in the former panel when someone said that VAT is a bad tax, and that hurt me personally, because I really work a long time of my life on VAT. And the way I came across UBI was through, I was looking for the optimal tax system, and I found that VAT is the most efficient tax that exists, and that should finance most of the state's spending. Besides other taxes, corrective taxes like carbon taxes, and that are also efficient, and land value taxes. And it's not only UBI. I see independence of the way it should finance all public spending, including UBI. So VAT taxes consumption, which is one of the problems that was mentioned in the former panel, instead of income, which is the effort of people to produce and to invest and to innovate, and they get fined when they get income for that. The other way around is to fine people what they take from the economy, and that's what consumption tax are doing. And anyway, but when you talk about VAT, the problem is its progressivity. It's really not progressive. So I found that UBI, together with VAT, is the optimal tax system. Because in one way, you raise funds for public spending in the most efficient way, and you also mitigate inequality and poverty also in the most efficient way by UBI. So that's what about the VAT. Now about the cryptocurrency. We are in good dollars are trying to cope with the global inequality rather the in-country inequality that most of the classic UBI refers to. UBI in the state level, and there was also in the form of a panel one that said try to solve also the problem of global inequality with the UN and with government cooperation. It's a good idea and it might work, but the trend now in the world is the opposite. More nationalism, less globalization. I don't see Trump voters pay tax to give UBI to poor Nigerians or Malawi or Egyptian. I don't see that happening in the next few years. The trend is the opposite. So we think about a way to make UBI independently of government. But for this, we have three problems. One that I call U, B, and I. The U problem is how to make it universal. If we are not government, we don't know, we don't have a list of people, where they live and who are they, and if they are real, if they are unique. So the first problem we have is how to identify the people that are registered to the system, that they are real and unique. This is the first problem. The second problem, I call the B problem, is basic. When we talk about global basic income, what is basic need? Well, $2 can save life in Africa, but after being 3 days in Oslo, it buys nothing in Oslo. Okay, so what is the basic needs in Norway or in other countries? So this is a problem. And the third problem, I called I, the income, it's the income of the system. How can we finance if we have a system that is not compulsory and we can't force people to pay tax in order to give it? So these three problems avoid people from, or avoid us from using a global ungovernmental UBI. But we think that now there's a new technology in the last 10 years, blockchain and smart contracts, that might be the beginning of the solution. And that's where we are trying to experiment in the good dollar and making, it's actually a series of experiments to try and solve this problem through cryptocurrency. To make a new cryptocurrency, if someone doesn't know what cryptocurrency, we have a session afterwards. We might explain it in a nutshell, but it's cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, something, a currency that is not made by government or by central bank or by banks. It's made by the people, for the people. So, as you know, for example, in Bitcoin, new coins are minted and go to the person who minted them, and that makes him richer. In our system, the system will mint the coins according to an algorithm, depending on time and users, and will go straight in an equal way to all users. And also the problem of identification is now being solved with a lot of startups around the world, how to have a valid identification over the blockchain. And the value, how this currency will get value, there is a lot of, it's a little short here to explain, but for example, all the projects that were mentioned earlier, clean water, renewal electricity, people can, donators can open these facilities and get people to pay with a good dollar that they got free from the blockchain, from good dollar. They got free currency, and while they start to pay for clean water or for electricity, then these coins will have value, and also other commercial companies can sell with good dollar. And as long as more people will have it, and it will be a very big tool or a mean of payment, then it will gain its value and will have a real value. And if they talk about $10 a month, I think it can be done. That is for now.
But I would like to add one question. So cryptocurrencies, for me, it's always a little bit of a miracle. But my idea is, or the question is, can there be a pilot project with that cryptocurrency, with blockchain gold dollar? Can there be anything that makes visible how it works? Maybe in a certain community worldwide who are involved in this project. So is there anything that can become visible and reportable?
Actually, good dollar is not the only one who tried to do this UBI of the blockchain. There are several groups that are trying to do it, and also in a very short, in a very small scale. In Kenya, for example, there is such a thing that give cryptocurrency to people, and then they can buy things in the village and pay, and it starts to work. We try to make it globally, in a global scale, but there are few experiments that are now being done. And there are also other cryptocurrencies that give UBI already, with a little shops that you can buy, or can buy second-hand things and little other things. It's really in the beginning, but it's gain momentum.
So the next I have to read again. Uwe Jakobsen, and he's professor of ecological economics, director of the Center for Ecological Economics and Ethics, member of the board of the Bode Graduate School of Business at the University of Nordland. His work is related to philosophy, economics, business administrations, systems theory, and art. And he wrote a lot of books, among others, Anarchism and Ecological Economics. So I would like to give you... Yeah.
Thank you very much for the invitation to participate and contribute in this very important conference. As you said, Center for Ecological Economics and Ethics have existed since 1993 at the business school in Bode. And we do research, and we have courses on all levels, bachelor, master, and PhD. And now I will say nothing more about that, but go directly into the topic today. And I have titled this contribution for a transformative approach to a sustainable future. And I connected to my two latest books. First, Transformative Ecological Economics. And the concept transformative is connected to ecological economics because I also discuss the spiritual dimensions of economy. Not only connected to thermodynamics and Darwinist evolutionary theories, but also spirituality inspired by Buddhist philosophy and also anthroposophy, Rudolf Steiner's contribution. The latest book published this year, Anarchism and Ecological Economics, a transformative approach to a sustainable future, is a question why does not anything happen? Everybody talks about greening the economy, they talk about the green shift, and nothing happens really. So my question is there something wrong with the existing ideology? And then I search for alternatives. And then I come into anarchism and find a very interesting source of inspiration. So, and also the time is right for this kind of thinking. 100 years ago, the time was not right, but today, I refer to the New Scientist, for example, say that what can science do to reshape economics and make it fit for a finite world? And the other citations under there, our global systems which are designed for perpetual growth need to be fundamentally restructured to avoid the worst case outcome. And this was everything I want to say about negative things. After this, only constructive, positive input. A deeper systemic change is needed. I now refer to Niculescu. I could have referred to a whole lot of other researchers, but I think Niculescu points at a very interesting and relevant thing when he says it is not enough to make modifications within the existing system. We need a deeper systemic change. To solve the complex challenges we are facing today, transdisciplinarity is not only possible, but also vitally necessary. So in other words, we have to restructure the work in the university, we have to connect between different faculties, institutes, and so on, and we also have to connect to practice, and in addition to that, we have to work together with people in art. Erik Fromm said something interesting in 1955, reform can be radical, that is going to its roots, or it can be superficial, trying to patch up systems without touching the causes. And in my opinion, we are trying to reduce negative symptoms without touching the causes these days. So we have to go deeper, dig deeper. And to find out these things, we have to take a quick step into philosophy of science. And I have been inspired from the Hungarian philosopher Imre Lakatos, who differs between the hardcore in a research system and the protective belt. And he says that theories, concepts, preconditions that are taken for granted and cannot be questioned without threatening the research program or the ideology, in my interpretation, is something that is never discussed. But we discuss the protective belt, how theories and concepts that can be changed in order to protect the hardcore. And I will give examples and connect it to the difference between green economy and ecological economics. In green economy, we are living without asking questions to the hardcore of the existing system. Ecological economics ask these kind of questions, and therefore we come into, what could I say, trouble. That is a positive thing from my position. Green economy, focus on reducing negative symptoms within the dominating ideology. Green economy is an attempt to rescue the existing system by curbing the negative systems of the established ideology. Changes in the protective belt without challenging the hardcore. An example here, growth is a part of the hardcore in the existing capitalist market economy. This is changed to green growth. Growth is still there, but we make some changes in the protective belt. It's green instead of only growth. And we say that competition is still there, but is now hidden behind some concepts like, for example, CSR or other fancy things that we find on every homepage to every company today. Without anything happens really. And the strategic planning, in other words, a plan for beating your enemies, is changed to eco-management for a better reputation. And ecocentric rationality is circular economy for higher competitiveness, is an example. I had just a meeting with Paal Norge, Waste Norway, and they totally agree that this is not enough to solve the problems you are facing today. And I find a definition of, for example, circular economy that is very interesting in this connection. A circular economy is led by business for a profit within the rules of the game, within the hardcore. Higher competitiveness, higher resource security, and material efficiency. So in other words, we try to reduce negative symptoms without going into the real causes. And another contributor in philosophy of science is Paul Feyerabend. And he says something that is absolutely necessary to be aware of when we talk about change in our systems to make it possible to have a sustainable future. He says, to reach any new understanding, we have to ask questions that challenge and contradict well-established theories. The consistent condition demanding that new hypotheses are consistent with accepted theories serves to keep the older theories in place. And here we find something interesting for all of us who are working with studies and universities and things like that. We always ask our students to put the research question into a frame of reference based upon accepted theories. And then Feuerabend says, then we are secure that nothing will happen. They are bound to be within this cave. Success by scientists has traditionally involved non-scientific elements. And this is not normative, this is a description of how the deep changes in science have come out in history, according to Paul Feuerabend. And he says, the consistency condition, the condition that demands that new hypotheses are consistent with accepted theories, merely serves to keep the older theories in place. So we have to ask questions that contradict established theories. And then, what is ecological economics? Ecological economics was established as a university topic in 1989 in USA, Maryland, but I think it has existed since Aristotle, more than 2,500 years. And the economy we are referring to today, the capitalist neoliberal economy, have only 200 years history. So from one perspective we can say that ecological economics is a new topic, but from another perspective this is the economy, how we manage our resources from the beginning in our European tradition. Ecological economics focus on the causes behind the most serious current problems: poverty, environmental sustainability, war, terrorism. All these things that we find in the UN 17 development goals, sustainable development goals. Ecological economics encourage new utopian ways of thinking about linkages between ecological, social and economic systems. So here we connect economy to society and we connect economy to nature. And in an abstract theory of economics, this is not the fact today. Economy is an abstraction both from culture and nature. So ecological economics asks critical questions to the hardcore and disturbs the existing system and suggests revisions. And here is a very interesting point, because many universities and business schools said we do not want ecological economics in our curriculum because it makes disturbance. But the point here is that is exactly what we want, to make disturbance, to make people think. Ruth Levitas, a very important researcher in using utopian methods in England these days, have a very good answer when people say you are talking about utopia, it's not possible, this is interesting but I have nothing to do with the real world. Then she says, utopia is not about the impossible, what is really impossible is to carry on as we are. Everybody accepts that, we cannot have growth, exponential growth on Earth that is not growing. So that is easy to understand. The next one, the utopian workshops. We are working all over Norway and in other countries too with what we call utopian workshops, where people are invited to define a future where they want to live. We paint a picture of the future that we really want to go into. We are inspired, we have energy, we have direction, we want to go into that future because we have made it ourselves, bottom up. We are not using experts to tell us about how the future should be. We ask people, how is your society in 20, 30, 50 years that you really want to go into? This is more, what should I say, relevant and inspiring and motivating than making people afraid and saying that if you do not change your habits, everything will go to hell. That is not a good inspiration for change. So, and here I refer to the context, when we divide between ideology and utopia, I refer back to Karl Mannheim, another Hungarian sociologist, who said that the tension between ideology and utopia is the energy and makes the direction for change. And he published his book in 1936. In 1986, Paul Ricoeur, French philosopher, published a book with the same title, Ideology and Utopia. And we say and utopia, not or, and. So we both need ideology, and ideology describes actuality. Ideology describes the present from inside, is rooted in the ideas of the dominant social groups, refers to accepted norms and values, and justifies authorities. And this is a good society. Everybody agree on that. This is a well-ordered society. But according to Paul Ricoeur, we need the tension between what is and what could be. And you see, actuality and potentiality, we refer back to Aristotle. The tension between what is and what could be is the driving force for change. So therefore, we have to put more focus on utopia and to develop utopian ideas. And utopia understands the present from outside, is somewhere else. And this is the definition from Thomas More and his book, Utopia from 1516, 500 years ago, geared towards the future. Should not be realized, it can only work in that direction. So we have to work with utopian thinking all the time. We have not a finished idea about how the future will be. It's an ongoing process that we, bottom up, should participate in, not leave that to experts or politicians. And Paul Ricoeur says, in a society without utopia, ideology becomes static. Without ideology, utopia becomes a mirage. So we have to connect to reality in a way. The utopian thinking must be connected to reality. And then we have the change, ecological economics changes in the hardcore. Here is something disturbance with not only with the utopian thinking, but also with the technique picture here. But okay, ideology and utopia. We ask questions to the hardcore. Instead of quantitative growth, we talk about qualitative development. And development has something to do with relations. Growth has something to do with objects. So when we talk about qualitative development, dialogue-based interaction is central. And in accordance, connected to that, from atomistic competition to cooperative networks. We have to establish networks where people work together to solve problems and to make a brighter future happen. Strategic planning, the military concept, strategy, how make a plan, how to beat your enemies in the military context, or in the market where you should beat your competitors. We change to a partnership approach. And we change from saying that rationality is to behave like a egocentric, utility maximizing person, to be an ecological man, where you include both human beings and nature in your ego. And this is inspired, for example, from Spinoza. So, in other words, the intention of a utopia is to change, to shatter the present order. I know my conclusion in the book of Anarchism, I asked the question, why does not anything happen, even if most of us say we want what we can call a green shift? Okay, we want qualitative development, we want cooperation, we want partnership approach. We put it into the existing ideology, I call it a converter, growth, competition, strategy, what comes out? Green economy, green growth, sustainable competition, green strategy. It's obvious. But the next thing is, why is it so? Yeah, I have an explanation here. If we compare practice to ideology, we can find out that what is possible in practice and possible within the existing ideology, we find green economy. This is no problem. Everybody accepts it. We want green economy, we earn more money, we have a great position on the market, everything is okay, and we reduce the negative symptoms in the same way. Ecological economics is absolutely possible in practice, but it is impossible, in my opinion, within the existing system. So we have to do some changes here. But we can also say that we can be a technological optimist and say what is practical, impossible today, could be possible if technology solve all the problems. So that is maybe a possibility too. But the idea that we can move to another planet when this Earth is finished, I think that is impossible both in practice and in ideology. And then, if we convert it, I know it's a question, what could be the output? We put in the same thing, qualitative development and so forth, into a converter, and we are inspired from Kropotkin, Reclus, the organic anarchists talking about a community, talking about freedom and solidarity, self-government, mutualism, cooperation, decentralized system, and so on and so forth. What comes out, maybe, if you are very optimistic like me, human flourishing, equity, direct participation in associations and communities. I don't know, maybe. I think we have to try something new. And now the last picture. And this is a figure from the first book, Transformative Ecological Economics. I think we have to discuss the worldview, how we understand the world we're living in. So in all our courses in ecological economics, we start with a discussion of the changes in the European culture between a mechanical way of thinking and an organic way of thinking. And I will not go through all the changes today, but there have been many changes through history. But today we are almost only talking about a mechanistic way of understanding things. So the first thing we have to do is to reflect on the change from a mechanistic to an organic way of thinking. And this has influence on the systems level. If we think in an organic way, we have to change from atomistic competition to cooperative networks. All ecologists today accept and agree in that change. They say in nature we have cooperative networks, synergy effects, we have never the opposite. And then the image of man. We have to change from the economic man to an ecological man. And more than that, if we connect these things to practice, we will say that practice have to change from trying to beat every other economic actor to build a partnership approach, to base our thinking about and practice about a partnership approach. And then we have a possibility here to connect all these things. And the last word from me in this introduction is that today we ask practice to change, to behave responsible towards society, individuals, and nature, without asking questions to the rationality of the image of man, without asking questions to the system, and the answer is obvious: nothing happens. So we have to dig deeper, we have to say something about the systems levels, and we have to discuss the rationality, the concept of rationality in human beings, in individuals. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that was a bunch of topics, and I would like to add, and all this can become possible if we separate income and work on the basis of, on the level of a basic income, so that you can step out of the system. Okay, that was the conclusion. But I think there can be many, many questions about this. What really happens that the companies, the economy has all that values in their programs since 30 years. But they always just use that for advertisement, competition, and to kill the others who don't have that. So that's a question ultimately about what we understand by what the human being is. So and today we have this philosophy of a human being that it is this Homo economicus. Okay, I would like to introduce Thomas Hylland Eriksen, Professor of Social Anthropology at the University of Oslo, former President of the European Association of Social Anthropologists, and he also has written several books and is dealing with the quality of life, ecology, identity politics, nationalism and globalization and related issues. So I would like to give you.
I'll start. So thanks very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. And in my brief comments, I think I'll take my cue from what Uwe Jakobsen said about the changing worldviews and the potential for changing society, and connecting this to the concept of basic income. And I would also say a few things about some of the ways in which perhaps our worldviews can be changed, because it's not enough, to decide that worldviews must be changed. We've had a lot of knowledge for a long time. Knowledge has existed for a long time about the conditions for a good life, for a just society, for an ecologically sustainable world. And as Uwe Jakobsen rightly says, very little has happened. And why is that? Well, I think it's because there's a disconnect between worldviews, which cost you 2 calories to change. It's very cheap. I mean, to change your worldview if you want to. And practices, which are much more inert, which are more sluggish, which are material, which are connected to infrastructures, to investments, to institutions, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to basic income, and some of the ideas underlying basic income, and one of the reasons why I find them attractive, let me just give you a very short anecdote, or not really an anecdote, it's an anthropological report from an African village. And it's a typical report from an African village, mid-20th century, that I came across as an undergraduate. Where you have this village based on subsistence agriculture, a bit of trade. It's pretty poor by European standards, even the European standards of the early post-Second World War years. This was a poor place, but it was not the place where people starved. And why was that? There was no starvation. There wasn't much of a surplus either, but there was a bit of trade, as I said. So that the people in the village could actually buy or through barter or exchange, obtain certain goods that they were not capable of producing themselves. For example, metals and cloth. But there was no starvation. And why is that? Well, the reason is that they had a good system of redistribution. So the chief said to the anthropologist, a very typical statement from a Central African chief at the time. He said to the anthropologist, I'm the chief, I'm supposed to be in charge of everything here, and in a sense I am in charge of everything here. But I'm the poorest man in the village, because I have to redistribute everything they give to me. People came to the chief with what we would call tax money, or tax, payments, okay? In goods, okay? Whatever they had. And everybody knew, because this was a fairly small, it was easy to get an overview of what people had. They would have to give a share of it to the chief. And his duty was to redistribute it to people who needed it. There was no question as to whether someone had deserved to get their share through redistribution. Rather, who needed, who were the needy, who were the poor, who were the people who would otherwise starve. They were prevented from starving because the chief had this duty of redistribution. So that's a very primitive system of basic income, if you see what I mean. Very primitive system of basic income where no question is asked as to whether you have deserved it through your hard labor, but whether you need it. Or it's a form of, you might say, primeval communism in the Marxist terms also, perhaps, up to a certain point. Now what I'm going to do when I now reflect on some of the possible implications of a basic income scheme, some of the possible implications, is to largely take as my point of departure not the Namibian case or the global south, but the affluent societies, okay? People like us. As early as the 1930s, John Maynard Keynes pointed out that owing to increased efficiency and higher productivity, and he might have added automation, and he certainly would have had he lived a few decades later, people in a kind of society that Great Britain is, that kind of society, wouldn't have to work maybe more than 15 hours a week at the end of the century. That is the end of the 20th century. And as we know, yes, I mean, all of this happened. Increased productivity, increased efficiency, automation, technological advances have enabled us to work far less. And still we continue to work about 40 hours a week. Why is that? I think the answer to this is complex, and I'm not going into it here. But what I want to say by pointing this out is that we have so many options now, particularly in this part of the world, but also globally. We have so many options, and we're not using any of them. There must be an element of path dependency there, that we do what we used to. We go to work, and some of us have meaningful jobs, others less. Some of us perform necessary work, others do less, but we could have done things very differently. And what we've already seen, yeah, that's not my note, but it's, sorry? Oh yeah, well, thanks very much, yeah. Thanks very much. What we do know is that we could have done so many things differently, but let's realize that, in fact, although basic income has somehow been on the radar for a number of years, it's not really on the political agenda in an earnest and serious way. And why is that? I think the answer is complicated, and I'm not going into all the counter-arguments here, but let me just mention one typical objection, namely is that if people were to receive a guaranteed income, preventing them from starving, they would be lazy. You know, they would just lie on the couch and drink beer and watch Netflix in this part of the world. In other words, a fundamentally flawed view of human nature. Because human beings have a fundamental need to be needed, okay? One of the most fundamental needs is to be needed, to perform useful tasks, to make yourself useful and even indispensable to others. So to me, one of the attractions of basic income is not that it would legitimate laziness. I mean, we need to argue against that in a consistent way, because it's not true. We know it's not true. It would not encourage laziness. It would rather encourage people and enable people to perform other kinds of necessary tasks outside the wage work. It would problematize the boundary between wage work and non-wage work in the economy. Non-wage work would increasingly also be seen as part of the economy with a basic income scheme. Necessary work, which is not paid, which is often slow, often low, sort of low intensity, low productivity by the criteria of conventional economics. I like that. The balancing cow. Yeah. I'll finish very soon. Yeah. So we could think about and also connected to some of the thoughts that have been presented here earlier. A shift, shifting the balance not only away from wage work, but shifting the balance also away from individual to collective, from competition to cooperation, and it would also encourage what I think is seriously needed these days, namely a total renovation of the concept of development. What do we mean by development? It's not the whole answer, but it's one important piece in the jigsaw puzzle that we need to lay out now in order to survive the 21st century in a reasonably decent way.
Thank you very much. That was so short.
I shouldn't have given away my 5 minutes earlier on. I realized I have to take them back now. I think this is big thoughts and it's interesting thoughts, but what I find the most fascinating with the UBI is what happened to someone that gets it. And I think that's one of from the Finnish experiment, one of the results there is that people had more trust. People got more trust to society, to politicians, and I think that is such a great thing with the basic income. This is what we need. We need trust. And we don't have that today. That's why the society looks like it does, and all the right-wing nationalist parties coming up. Give people money and they feel trust. And that's what I notice every day in my working life when I work with these people that used to live on the street. You give them somewhere to live, you give them food, their life changes. They have trust, they have someone that believes in it. The girls I work with, if we believe in them, and they do miracles. So if they do miracles, everyone will do a miracle, and we will get much, much better and brighter society or future.
I think you have seen, so this is, for going on by basic income in Norway, you have to connect the scientists and the activists and the simple problems of those who are struggling with anything and those plans and ideas. So I guess this is just obvious by this podium, surprisingly for me, but that's everywhere. We need all that research, all that knowledge, but also it has to come to the people, to the ordinary people. And always, also for you, the question is, where can we start? You know, it's so huge, so many ideas, so important, and it comes to a world in oneself for me and a few colleagues, but how to come out of that? And how from the other side come from that direct problems with the people, so by encountering people, how can that come to a level that is higher, that is a society level? So how can we work together? I guess that is a main question, not to stay in your own world, which becomes more and more perfect, whether in critics or whatever, and to open up and to start moving. And that's for me. So I'm a painter, and you know, if you want to make a picture, you have to start anywhere. If you say it's global, yeah, but then you have to start in your backyard or anywhere. You have to make it real at the first step. I guess this is part of the strategy we have to consider, and how we can implement all these ideas about financing, everything like that, without fighting against each other, but to cooperate. So now we have a little time for your questions. Please there, up there.
I just wanted to ask the guy from Good Dollar. You mentioned that you can do ID via the blockchain, and I'm dying to know how you can do that. So that you can be absolutely sure that one person who signs up is actually only one person and they aren't signing up for 10 basic incomes.
Well, I didn't say we have done it already. I said we are experimenting, and there are some ideas about it. To do it totally decentralized, it rules out biological identification, for example, for now at least. But there are other ideas of social identity, that other people in the network might approve that a new person is real and is unique. It means it is not already in the system. So no one will have multiple accounts and will get multiple UBI. So this is also part of the experiment. And we are working on such algorithm, and we are incorporate with others who do it. And it will not go for 100%, but 96 will be enough for the beginning. I don't think even other identification system, even of the financial system, are not 100% safe. So we want to start with something, and there's any technological, it will advance in the future.
I have a question.
Well.
Over here, darling.
Yeah.
Here you go. Do you, to the panel, do you believe that it's possible with a paradigm shift without revolution? Because what you're talking about is a shift in paradigm. You're shifting, like thinking that what we teach in the schools today, we need to teach them something else, and the old ways needs to die. Is that possible without a revolution?
Thanks for the question. I mean, ultimately, I think that probably is what we need as a revolution, but I think basic income is a really good way to start there. We need to build the power to actually get it, and especially if we're demanding basic income from governments in particular, it's quite a lot for them to get their heads around. But I have to say, in my experience of organizing for basic income and talking to people on the street about it, and we've seen a bit of that here already in the audience, talking about basic income, it's an idea that people don't forget. And whether they like it initially or they don't like it initially, they don't forget about it and they think about it. The other thing it does, I think, is really open up people's minds about other things that need to happen. Whether that's about the monetary system, whether that's about the environment, whether that's about work, okay? It really kind of touches a lot of trigger points that people have, okay? If I can say, about, about our lives and how we lead them, so.
Well, the answer is no, because what we need to clearly need is to shift our way of approaching the world and what we think of as the economy towards a more holistic appreciation of the way in which things are interconnected. And obviously this has serious implications for the education. The reason I'm saying no is that it's already happening in a small way. And climate change being the most sort of mounting, as it were, challenge, which is new to humanity because it requires cooperation and not competition in order to be solved. It cannot be solved in one country. This will again lead us to interrogate the purpose of the economy. Is the purpose of the economy to help already absurdly rich people, individuals and corporations become even richer? Or is it to satisfy human needs and increasingly the needs of the planet? And if the answer is the latter and not the former, that will not require a revolution. I mean, in the conventional sense, before and after revolution. I don't believe in that. I believe in a gradual shift towards something qualitatively different.
Yeah, and that means that we should have revolutionary goals and evolutionary means.
So for me, I'm listening to Vikingers. So they have been conquerors and they should do that again with a new idea of economy. So there has been many questions, we can two more.
Well, I think anybody who comes to a meeting like this is familiar with some of the potential benefits of UBI. And I was wondering, it'd be nice to talk about the challenges and pitfalls. For instance, when it comes to sustainable development goals, we had poverty and equality. Now, couldn't, for instance, the UBI become kind of a poverty trap rather than the solution to poverty if you get half the population stuck in a low UBI and everybody else goes to work, and doesn't participate in the formal economy in the same way as the other half, or do you just keep the UBI so low that it's not really a real alternative to participating in the formal economy in the form of a regular job?
Okay, this is something that we grapple with constantly within the basic income movement, for sure. And there are many plans out there, some that are a lower basic income with other benefits on top, or various kind of permutations, or whether that's like a fully livable basic income, and certainly defining what is livable is a very, kind of slippery concept for sure. My own view, and this is again because I work in welfare and I also used to be on welfare myself, is that even if it's not a fully livable income in any particular area, having a portion of your income unconditional, all right, will make a very big difference, all right? I don't think, the fact that it goes to everybody means that it cannot, people will defend it, all right? When I'm working, because I'm working with a lot of people with disabilities and long-term health conditions, one of the problems that we've had in the UK, these have been cut. And part of the problem with, part of the reason that they've been able to cut this is because those different disability benefits, and there are about 5 or 6 different ones in the UK, well, there used to be anyway, there aren't so much anymore, is that, because those benefits just went to very small parts of the population, when the government wanted to cut them, there was no real outcry, all right? And so, if we can kind of start with a small, even if we start with a smaller basic income, again, it will make a massive difference for people who really have access to no money, because at the moment, again, in the UK, with the way the welfare reforms have gone through, there are people with no money. All right, so a little money is better than no money. Obviously, a livable amount, and we can argue until the cows come home about how much a livable amount is. And again, it very much depends on community. A lot of the people that come to see us for help with their benefits have done everything they can to avoid it, okay? And what that everything usually means is that they get into massive amounts of debt, not just with credit cards and banks, but also with their family, with their friends, with the people who actually make living on a low income possible and somehow more human. All right, so they get into debt, then those friends and family get fed up with them, they cut off the relationships, all right, and so then they come to us and they're having to deal with living on benefits, all right, without any of the kinds of human relationships which actually make that possible. One of the things I was going to talk, sorry if I can just, one more thing. Okay, when I was on benefits, I was raising my son, all right, and what I have to say is that having a secure place to live and having some money, some regular money coming in, that both myself and my son's father were able to have, made it possible for us to share his care equally. All right, made it possible, even though we weren't together, made it possible for us to raise our son, all right, in a way that was very, was very stable, and it meant that we didn't have to argue about money, and also we could just decide the time, when we were going to look after him in a very kind of humane way. So I have to say that a basic income, I think, would also make it very much more possible to stop the kind of competition that happens between parents, okay, especially when they split up, especially when kids are involved, all right, and make it much easier to be human with each other.
I just want to answer my view of your question. I think the thing is that you asked that from the system we have today, everything is valued in work and what we make, what we earn, that's how we are defined. But I think when we have a UBI, that changes. You can look at societies where money isn't as important, other values comes. So the society will change when we get the UBI, and then it's not going to be the same. You don't value people in what they're making, in living in the wage. As long as you have what you need, food and somewhere to live. So I think it will change.
It's not his question.
I want to say that basic income is very important to get rid of extreme poverty and increase fairness, freedom, creativity and other things connected to that. But I think it's even at least as much important to get rid of extreme richness, because this is a democratic problem. People with all this money have an influence of how the society develops. 10 people owns 50% of the world. And in the local communities you have the same thing, and they have an influence on what happens. That is a very important democratic problem. Therefore, basic income is of the greatest importance.
That is a final statement. We are over in the time, so I see there are many questions, but we will have this conference again and again and again. So I thank you very much. I thank you very much for your statements and your knowledge you shared with us, and for your listening and questioning. And I hope it will continue and grow and grow and grow in Norway.